Hello. This is week 4, and you have an essay due at the end to be emailed to me. I posted it on here. It's also in the syllabus. I'm going to ask you to watch some videos again, no Blackboard. I'm tempted to add the Blackboard, but I don't want to sink you while you're writing the paper. I understand most of you are doing you're teaching classes, most of you are holding down jobs, so I'm trying to keep this balanced. We have 16 weeks. So the 3 videos this week are, first one's Temple Grandin. If you don't know about her, you can look it up. I included a little bit of information under the assignment folder, under the content section. Temple Grandin is a professor of animal science, I think, at Colorado State University. Technically, she's never been diagnosed as having autism, but she grew up under very trying conditions. You'll see it in the movie. Claire Danes played her in the kind of semi-biographical. I think they exaggerate parts of it for the purpose of drama. But she's a very unusual person. She invented what's called a hug machine, which gave her comfort because she did not like to be touched by human beings or hugged. People associate that with autism. I'm not a SPED person. I'm not an autism expert. I have a friend that I might have on the video talk about this, but my feeling about this is that autism and many disabilities don't fit neatly into a nice definition like you would expect. Scientifically, we know what each chemical does, sodium and copper and silver and carbon. We can talk about those. The human beings in their brain function, their disabilities or abilities, however we describe them, or gifts, don't fit into a nice, neat pattern. So I will leave that with you on that for that purpose. And the other videos are about our accents. They deal with Appalachian talk, trucker talk, Jeff Foxworthy. If you don't know of Jeff Foxworthy, you probably haven't been in the country for 20 years, but Northern speech, how people, there's an example in the first video on Do You Speak American? A man talks with a different type accent, and then he finds out in 2 out of 3 that they say there's nothing to rent here because they suspect this person is a minority. So we know there's preference given to people depending on how they speak. And you've had your English teacher where people tell you if you're going for an interview or something, you don't say me and my mother, you say my mother and I. Little things like that, but of course language is far more complex. We know also that when we're speaking, we tend to let down, and we speak in a way that kind of betrays or gives away our background. But it's a lot of fun, but it's also important because I'm giving you this on Temple Grandin and on accents because multicultural education is not just a matter of figuring out the 5 or 6 main groups in the United States and talking about how they get along or don't get along or assimilate. It's actually far more complicated than that. I've got a little paragraph I've written here on my sheet that essentially, it's in the content area. My argument is that human beings, even in the smallest little groups or units, depending on what they're, if they're discriminated against and forced into a certain, there can be a place called they call them ghettos in urban areas where a group of people have to live together. This is very typical of minorities coming to the United States in the early 20th century, that in certain parts of Chicago it would be Polish, or it might be Jewish, or it might be Puerto Rican, things like that. whatever group you're put into, it may be ethnic group, but it could be a group that's put together by somewhat artificial, arbitrary means. Political, I don't know, political prisoners. Under the Nazis, there were all kinds of people being isolated because they were different. So they all developed their own culture. That's what I'm driving at here. They developed their own culture. I think Temple Grandin's an example when you talk about autism. And toward the end of the movie, when she's talking in front of a group of people and they have an expert there trying to explain that autism is some kind of a psychological condition and it needs to be treated with therapy. She speaks with expertise because she knows what autism is. Take that with a grain of salt, but the movie's not only well acted and well done, but I like it because if you think about someone who's classified differently or culturally, however you want to see that, I like to think about their world as another culture and how can I understand their perception of the world. Now with Temple Grandin, when she gets off a plane, it's hot in Arizona, she literally sees flames. I know reading in another book that there was a lady that was diagnosed autistic, I think, and she saw grass as literally flames. She's very uncomfortable around grass, and most would say, grass, what's this grass? But she would see it jagged like it's burning or something. And so her perception of it caused fear. We are enculturated in ways. We have fear of snakes, fear of spiders. Some people, due to experience, have fear of water. I don't know how to swim. I'm not, the idea of going into the deep blue sea scares the hell out of me. But you may say that's individually, that's not culture. But within groups, there are common behaviors and things. And the reason I want to show you Temple Grandin is I want you to think about people that deal with certain conditions, I'd say gifted kids too, people that are different in groups. They have their own culture attached with them. And I think it has to be looked at. I think it's so naive to read, even in Banks' books, great book, but it doesn't cover all the cultures. It talks about African American, Puerto Rican, Hawaiian, etc. But that's just looking at ethnic groups. From the crude attempt that we used to have race, and we know that race is a meaningless concept. You can't prove anything from it. It's not scientific actually at all. All right, now the second part has the 3 parts on the language. I love this. You're going to enjoy it. It's going to take you with Temple Grandin, and it's going to be about 3 hours of video. But you know what? You just soak it up and watch it and just make sure that you think about it. And I put some questions in here. You don't have to write about them. You don't have to talk to me about them. If one of you wants, or all of you want to email me and discuss things, I am wide open. No problem. You can even call me. But the Northeast, I really like on the 3 parts, the Southern and the West Coast. I like Clueless, Spanglish. There's a section in there, there's a movie, Spanglish. More movies I could get, we got a lot already. But I like these because they get us to think about how we treat other people because of the way they speak. I really was a little emotional about the Appalachian talk because I like to think I don't have any of that in my language. But I know if you've heard me speak, you may say, well, Glenn talks a little Southern, or he has a y'all in there or something. We don't say that where I'm from. And it's kind of mixed feelings because I like to think I don't speak Southern, but I like to be able to speak Southern. It's kind of weird. It's kind of like, I don't know what it's like, but it's like trying to be a part of something but not acknowledging that you're a part of it. I took one of those tests once and it said it wasn't a very good test, I'm sure, but it said I had a lot of Arkansas, Oklahoma speech in my language. And that's actually true because my mother was from Oklahoma, southern Oklahoma, so of course I picked that up. Not Texan, but Oklahoman. Another part that's interesting in this is I just like how language is invented and how surfer talk, guys that surf, they have their own little language, they have their own culture. Valley Girl, from the movie Clueless, people were speaking, well, that was then, it's gone. But California has its own language system. It's quite different. And people move in from California, you notice they have different vocabulary. And I could give you examples, but I don't want to show off my great linguistic. Yeah, it's like I try to fake speaking like an Englishman or an Irishman or a Scot. I can do it for 3 or 4 sentences, and then I start falling apart. And pretty soon it's like you're talking like Ringo, and then you're talking like you're Scottish, and because you can't maintain it because you really don't know it that well. But people from different parts of Mexico, different parts of Latin America, different parts of France, different parts of Russia, different parts of China, there are differences. All Australians don't speak the same way. I'm sure Melbourne and Canberra and Perth have different accents. And you are an expert because you're from an area. I really am sensitive. I can tell Iowa people, because I lived on the other side of the border from Iowa in northern Missouri, and I'd hear people speaking, so, oh, they're speaking Iowa, like it was some Native American language. But I could tell they're speaking Iowa. And if they were from northern Iowa, they spoke almost Minnesotan. And I don't even want to make a Minnesota accent because you'll either get mad, laugh at me, or I don't want to leave a record of it. But the point is that when you get really a sensitive ear to certain regions in your own state, I heard somebody once from southern Missouri. I couldn't believe they're from southern Missouri. I thought they were from Mississippi. Well, when you get far enough down there, you're very close to Mississippi because you're right down the corner, Arkansas, Mississippi. So that was interesting. Okay, well, I'm going to shut up now before I go too long. And this is just to give you an introduction. If you want any ideas about the essay, you can email me or something. I think I put enough information in there about the essay. You do want 5 pages. You go to that Purdue OWL, which is a site that shows you how to cite things. You really don't have to write a research paper, but if you do quote something, at least put it in parentheses and with the proper, so I know what it is. I'm not a picky person about it, but I don't want you to just write something and make it sound like, this person became an incredible writer for 2 paragraphs. What a vocabulary they added in. All right, thank you, and I'll see you next week.